Hi, everybody.
Here we are again.
All right.
Should we get right to it?
Let's get right to it. We're going to get to the questions that were sent to us before the broadcast. So Michelle's going to read the first one. Some of these are a little longer because, well, that's the nature of addiction, right?
Do you want me to read this whole thing?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm 25 years old and will start working on an undergraduate degree in behavioral neuroscience this coming fall. The decision to do so sparked by my passion to fight the toxic misinformation flooding in from all channels about substance use. I abused prescription opiates for nearly 6 years and suffered some heavy consequences in the form of overdoses, flunking out of college twice, damaged relationships, and the like. A story I'm sure you're all familiar with. I had a similar story. I was shoved into the rehab system a few years ago by a family full of AA members that strongly believe in the 12-step method. Nothing I've ever been told about addiction has ever made sense, so I've always sought to find the answers on my own. The Freedom Model filled in all the missing puzzle pieces for me and is the only model that has explained my experiences and what I have seen in the treatment and recovery worlds. I'm just a kid trying to finish school, still dependent on loans and family assistance to pay for school, due to being forced to exist in the recovery community for several years in order to continue receiving support. Most of my social circles consist of people in 12-step work, and continual support from my family for school is contingent on working the program, in quotes. This has led to a feeling of immense isolation and disconnect from my peers. I've grown to despise being labeled an addict and am now finding it increasingly difficult to feign participation in a program that I now believe is actively harming people. Is it best to continue to talk the talk despite feeling complicit with spreading their toxic ideology, or is there a way to reach my family that might not result in becoming a pariah? Like Mark said, my family is steeped in AA. Moving forward from that, I'd like to ask, as a non-professional and someone without many resources, what is the best way for me to reach people in the recovery community? The brainwashing is hard to penetrate, but there must be something that can be done here in the trenches. So there's a bunch of questions in there.
Yeah, I spoke with this fella. We spent a couple hours on the phone, and the question that he's struggling with is, how do I deal with my family that's steeped in AA? And he's getting financial assistance contingent on him remaining a part of the charade of AA and the recovery community, which he's abandoned without them knowing based on the Freedom Model. Now he hasn't fully abandoned it because he has to go to the meetings, he has to play the role, but he asked me, do I need to keep doing this? Should I continue to do this? Am I complicit? And, there's no clear answer to that because everybody's situation is different. In my case, I can tell you that I didn't like being beholden to my family. And so I left them. I left. I never went back. And I sort of moved on with my life. Now, my experience is a little bit rare because I wasn't very close. Even though I came from a big family, I wasn't very close to them. But I literally hit the road and forged my own path and figured out what I wanted to do with my life and got away from their support. I got away from the family businesses. I got away from all of it. So I didn't have to be beholden on anything. Now, I knew a fella that had almost the identical upbringing as me, which is kind of odd, came from the same German heritage. And he did it differently. He was from Long Island, and his family had money, and they paid for his college tuition, which is very similar to this fella's story. And he said to me, Mark, I'm going to do this with my family because it pays. It pays to do it. And I understood that. I got it. And it made his family happy because they felt like they had some control. I think what it comes down to in all the cases is the word autonomy. And that is, no matter what your family, whatever strings they keep attached to you, or you allow them to keep attached to you, you're still your own person and you get to think what you want to think. I can't tell somebody to continue the charade or feel like a puppet with their family. I can't tell them that that's a good idea. I can't say it's a bad idea because I'm not inside those people. And I didn't grow up in that house. So you have, I guess the answer that I would give is it all comes down to really what you want. It was more important for me to be autonomous and poor for a long time and to go out and get loans and put myself through school, because for me, that was the important part. Okay. But again, I met somebody that grew up very similar to me and had the opposite reaction. He said, why would I put myself through that when I can get a 4-year degree that my father's willing to pay for if I just play this game? In both of our cases, we were sober, productive, had moved on with our lives. He played the charade and I didn't. I don't think one is right or one is wrong.
Well, I want to come at it from a little bit different angle, and that is that there's a couple things at work here. You've got a family that is fully invested, and we're seeing this with professionals too. When people are fully invested in the 12-step model and their whole world is wrapped up in it, just simply coming in from an angle of it's all wrong, you're shaking their foundation. It's a fearful thing for people they're hanging on to it so tightly. I mean, I would definitely recommend, the family book it's not intimidating. It's about 100 pages, and it's gentle. You know what I mean? It doesn't start with anyone can moderate. Yeah. Don't give them the book.
Don't give them the big blue book.
The main book, because forget it. They won't even read past the first line. But the family book is set up differently to kind of ease people into the idea that addiction is not a disease, that we get that people struggle, but it also eases them into the idea that you don't get to decide how your kid lives, because it's not up to you.
Well, let me just say that the reason that Michelle is going on this angle is because she wrote it. And she really gets that dynamic with the families, and she's right. I didn't even think about that we have a book that goes through how to navigate that very situation.
Yeah, and if you gently go, look at I'm because remember, parents are fearful. You struggled for 6 years. They watched you go through it. Right. They lived that. They were terrified that something bad was going to happen. So you kind of got to be gentle with them and be like, look, I'm doing something different, but I'm not going back to doing what I was doing. I want to reassure you that's not happening. Here, can you read this book so you know what I'm doing?
That's a great point.
That would be my suggestion.
Great point. Steve?
Steve's got a cold.
Yeah. No, I don't. I mean, this is. I guess the only thing I can sort of. I mean, I was involved with my family, but and there was a lot of things being dangled for years to get me to stop. It didn't get me to stop. But then when I did. I maintained the ties, the strings, whatever you want to call it, but they were never fully on board with 12-step stuff to begin with. They were kind of going along with it a little bit. My mother said somebody brought her to Al-Anon or Nar-Anon, one of those.
Yeah.
And she was disturbed by that meeting, and but they sort of went along with this disease stuff because that was what was being offered, and they were very happy when I went to the retreat and just made such a quick turnaround. So I didn't have to deal with them saying keep going to meetings or anything like that. And a couple of years ago, my mom bought me. She gave me a bottle of Maker's Mark for my birthday. So.
That's awesome.
They clearly, it's like, well, they can see that I changed, but they're not
grow up
in that ideology that it's impossible to change, And some people really are, and they think you need this ongoing support. And this is a concept. I get this question. In my blog a lot too. People email me the same type of question. How do I tell my loved ones this, or they want to tell other people. It's like a choose your battle type of thing.
It is.
And
Yeah.
for me, the current choose your battle thing in my life is politics and people discussing politics and different and being really rabid about it and acting like they want to have a conversation, but they really don't. Like if you disagree with them at all, they're gonna hate on you. And and I used to get so frustrated with that. And then I reached a point where I said, it's really just not worth discussing that with people, and they can rattle off really offensive stuff, and I'll just let it slide by without entering, and I know they try to drag me into the conversation, but I'll just let that go by because it has no value to me. But in this situation with the parents and the AA, the whole, if they're steeped in it, that there's these strings, it just complicates everything. And there is, like Mark started to say, no easy answer for whether you should sort of go through the motions or not.
I think that it comes down to what part of it is important to you. The reason I use the analogy of me and this fella Dave and the two different approaches is we really had a very similar situation and two completely different approaches. I wanted to cut the strings. I wanted to be independent completely on my own. I was willing to pay that price to have my own ethos, right? I was willing to just say, this is who I am, no matter what. And honestly, for a little while, I was homeless and broke, and it was hard, and then I put myself through college, and I did all of that. But I don't think it's any more honorable than not doing that. I think it comes down to what you want, what's important to you. But I want to get back to what Michelle said, and that is a book. It's funny, when I have a conflict with somebody, a real deep, difficult conflict, I write a letter. Yeah. And if there's a book necessary, I'll give them a book. But usually a letter is enough if I really spend the time to craft it and not be offensive. And then I give it to them and I say, read it when I'm not around. Because what happens is people will read something, they'll get offended without you there, then they'll read it again, then they'll read it again because it bothers them. And then by the fifth time they read it, they go, oh, I get what he's saying. Mm-hmm. And then you have the conversation. They'll come back to you and you have the conversation. So that might be another approach, just a little tool that's worked for me and a lot of conflict through many years of just human living.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, let's get to the second part of the question. I can't read it because I don't have my glasses on.
Moving forward from that, I'd like to ask, as a non-professional and someone without many resources, what is the best way for me to reach people in the recovery community? The brainwashing is hard to penetrate, but there must be something that can be done out here in the trenches.
Can I start this one?
Yeah.
I tried to change AA from within AA for 12 years. And it was probably the most trying and painful, brutal time in my life.
We were abused, literally.
Yeah, it was. If there's one thing I know now that I didn't know in my youth, it's you really can't change people's opinions if they don't want them changed. And if they're not asking to be changed.
Right.
And I've learned to recognize when somebody is asking a genuine question, like, how do I get out of AA and stay out of AA? And if they ask that question, I have an answer. But if you're in the recovery community, very few people are asking that question. But I would keep it as simple as, here's a book, here's the freedom model, here's whatever book it is that it's almost the same as the letter.
Yeah.
This
might help you, especially if there's somebody that's coming in and out of meetings and they're going through the cycle.
Oh, yeah.
You could be like, you know what, maybe there's something better for you. And maybe I think it's important to let people know that are in the recovery community, if this isn't working for you, it doesn't work for most people, so it's okay.
Yeah.
It's not your fault. You've been given the wrong information. This is not really where you should be. Here's a book.
Right.
I wanted to say, This really looks like it could be in the nightstand at a hotel, right?
Yeah, it sure does.
Looks kind of like the Bible, right?
Yes, it does.
But it's the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, right? It's a religion, you know? And so if somebody is a true believer and you come at them with, hey, that there is wrong, first of all, I think that that's unwelcome, you know?
Yeah.
So it is, you know, and second of all, it's you know, it's as deeply held a belief as religion. So I think you have to wait until it's kind of thing of wait until those people, you know, who are struggling, you have normal contact with them and they see that you're doing well, and they ask you. I kind of feel that way about it.
That's a great point.
Yeah,
that's a great point.
You know, and I've taken that, first of all, just because I've pissed off too many people over the years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Me too, buddy.
We were kind of in your face for a while.
What's that?
We were kind of in your face for a while.
Yeah, we've all three of us have gone down that road of pissing people off.
Yeah. And I've done it inadvertently, just telling people, well, I'm so excited about what I just did, right? Like within my first year, you know, after 5 years in and out of, you know, methadone and meetings, and yeah, you know, I was, oh, guess what? I found out it's not a disease and I just quit. Like, oh, well, oh, okay. You know, well, let me tell you all about it. And then I'm telling somebody, it's like, well, my son is like in AA right now, you know, so I think it is a thing of sort of sit back and just like at us as an organization, Baldwin Research Institute, right? We've changed directions because of what you went through in the first 12 years, Mark. And then I was there for some of it where there were still hopes we would change the treatment industry. That was our mission statement.
It still is.
And, you know, that's not in the mission statement anymore, right? It's
no, it is.
It's there, but the way we're doing that has nothing to do with going head on to treatment.
Right.
Yeah.
We change the treatment industry, but we're not going to be in it causing trouble.
Right.
Yeah. You were like naive. You did research, and then you went to these rehabs and stuff, and these regulators, and they said, hey, look at the research we did. We found out that doesn't work in a different way, and they just responded by trying to destroy you, right?
Yeah.
So,
pretty much.
Yes, for real. Yeah.
It's really funny, but we have moved to reaching outside of that recovery world. There's all kinds of people that are scared, that feel like they have a problem. This addiction idea has colored the way they see their own substance use, and they've slipped into it without even getting into the rehab, because it's just everywhere now. Addiction is talked about everywhere you turn, and it's, I mean, just the evidence of that is all the people that do dry January now.
I know.
Oh, that's such an awful thing to watch. Like people, you know, that they don't have a drinking problem, and they're like, I'm going to do dry January, and you know, there's like this whole nervous thing behind it, like maybe I really do. And then they talk about how hard it is to not drink for a month. It's not hard to not drink for a month. Really, but you know, but by it's seeping into and sapping their confidence and coloring the way that they look at their own drinking. But so there's so many people out there that are suffering, that know enough to not get into the system. And you know, I find it I do casually mention, well, with me, it comes up in a natural way because people ask what I do.
Yep.
But they'll just, the average person, not somebody at a rehab, at a meeting, or it's just people in life. And then after I tell them a little bit, they go, oh, I kind of think that. And wow, that sounds like it makes sense to me. And that leads more places. And so, I guess I'm saying like veer away from the people in the recovery world. Although you're right to say, Michelle, it is good to let it be known that there's other ways. And there's plenty of ways to do that, I guess.
All right, we're going to move on to the next question. It's a great question that we got in the last couple of days. I'm a professional athlete. I smoke weed for pain management to deal with the physical grind of playing a sport for a living. What steps should I take to assure the people around me that I don't have a problem? And what can I do to educate people in the league that marijuana has real benefits? This is an interesting thing, because if you look at professional sports, and I'm a fan. I'm a true fan. I'm a football fan. I'm a baseball fan. I take issue with the whole all these leagues and their drug laws and PED laws, and people should just be left alone to do what they think is best for their own body. I really believe that, and there are performance enhancing things that are legal, and then that are surgeries that people will do to their body to enhance their performance. Yet they're not allowed to. It's all political, and the whole idea that, you have in professional sports these athletes that are on copious amounts of opiates, and that is totally allowed. And then, but somebody tests positive for marijuana and they get suspended and they're sent to rehab. It's completely outrageous. So I don't know how that can change. I think that this person will need, if they're a professional athlete that they have some connections, I think they're going to need to contact, the marijuana lobbyists, the legalized lobbyists. I think they're going to need to hire an attorney, maybe a civil rights attorney.
Well, that's where it gets to. There's no easy road when you have a contract that dictates it. I think what it shows most of all is how completely screwed up we are as a society when we pick good drugs and bad drugs, and that we're deciding for the players what they do in their off time. Look at if you smoke a bunch of weed and you become a stoner out on the football field or the hockey,
right, and your performance is terrible as a result.
Yeah,
then get fired.
It's auto-correcting, right? Then your contract is up. Now part of the problem is they're spending so much money on these players that it's become big dollars. But again, it's self-correcting. Here's what's interesting. Is you look at baseball and football when it started, decades and decades and decades ago.
Oh yeah,
and they were all
on cocaine.
Yeah, there's pictures.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they got cigarettes hanging out of their mouth,
a
whiskey on the field.
Yeah,
they're like on the field.
Yeah, I watched a documentary about a baseball player who he was taking acid while he pitched a perfect game or something.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. So, we've really kind of, I don't know.
Micromanaged.
We've gone, what it is the mythology of the power of drugs.
Yes.
And the irony is to think that marijuana is to lose your career over smoking some weed for pain management is ludicrous.
It's unbelievable.
It's totally ridiculous. So I don't think there's an answer in that scenario except for lawyer dealing with your contract and making a huge stink and being a part of,
making the change. You kind of got to almost, if this is the hill you want to die on and you want to take up the fight, you may be sacrificing your professional, athletic career to take up that fight. Maybe that's what you're supposed to do.
Or you just stop smoking weed or
in the end, you have to make a decision on what's more important. and what you want to do. And it bothers me that, if he was, pounding, a fifth of scotch every night or Oxycontins or something, he'd be still playing,
Yeah.
Well, if he was pounding a fifth of scotch, that would be one of those self-correcting things. He wouldn't be able to play the next day. He'd be so beat up.
True.
Right? And that's the wonderful thing.
Unless he was one of those players in the old days that drank and smoked.
Sure, maybe, yeah. But it's, I think, there's so many things wrapped up in this. I'm a big fan of Big Brother, and they had Ricky, what's his name on, who was suspended from the NFL for pot. And he was on Celebrity Big Brother this year. He was great. And basically he was saying like he decided to leave the sport because he just loved smoking pot so much. And I think he invested in a marijuana company or something like that.
He's probably making millions.
He left the sport. And so maybe it's worth having a fight. Maybe it's worth leaving and going into an area of coaching or working with children. I had a professional athlete a few years ago who ran camps for kids, and that's what his career is now, and he loves it, and he does very well. You can also consider other pain management options, right? Which is to go find the best pain specialist you can and say, is there some other way than marijuana or too many opioids? Because it sounds like he doesn't want to take the opioids. He doesn't really. He was against the pills, and maybe there's another way. Marijuana does go into muscle tissue, and that's why it can sort of relieve some pain. A lot of pain is related to tension in muscles. Mm-hmm. Michelle and I both read a book about pain in the past year that radically changed our lives. It changed our perception of pain, because pain perception is psychological on some level. And it's not saying it's all in your head, nothing like that. But there's a psychological element to it. And that's why smoking marijuana, even if it doesn't go in and zap away whatever the source of that pain is, that's why it can seem to sort of help you deal with pain. It can be a bit of a distraction from it, right? It's something else that feels good and is distracting. Plus it has some effect on muscles. There's so much to think about. What's that?
Steve, what's the name of the book that you guys...
it was by Dr. Sarno.
That's right.
Sarno. And I forget the exact title of it. But he has like 3 books, but it would be the one with like the most reviews on Amazon.
It's like a solution to back pain, curing back pain or something like that. But it's about all pain. Like the back pain is in the title, but he really talks about all kinds of pain and a syndrome that exists that, it's basically a pain syndrome that's related to our mental health and you have to read it. It's really interesting.
I just figured if it was helpful to you guys,
it's definitely worth a read. There was another element to this question though that I don't think that we're addressing. It was, how do I convince the people around me that I don't have a problem?
Oh yes.
Right, because there's one thing. Can you convince your sports league to allow you to take marijuana? We have no idea. That's such a big undertaking. Oh, did you guys disappear? It's Ricky Williams. That's who it was.
Okay.
All right, we're back. All right.
Yeah, we're back. It was Ricky Williams. That's who it was. Yep.
Ricky Williams. So that's one undertaking. How do I deal with the league? But another one is, how do I assure the people around me that this is not a problem? What would you guys say about that?
I don't know.
That is one of those things that it's the belief, the belief that there's a certain line that people cross where if they're using, you kind of touched on it in the last question, which when you were talking about dry January and things like that. I mean, there are people that believe if I drink 2 drinks every night, then I have a problem. Or if I, it kind of goes with that belief system. But a lot of people are going to look at somebody who got suspended from their job and say, you must have a problem, but you can lose your driver's license from having 3 drinks and driving home and getting caught. Do you know what I mean? But does that mean you have a problem with alcohol? Or does that mean that particular night you just had bad luck?
All these are valid points. It's funny because I spent so much time trying to convince people to change their view. I mean, I literally spent 30 years of my life doing this. And I discovered something early on, and that was if you have the guts to write a book about it, it tends to have credibility because most people won't write down their thoughts because they're held to them. Because once you write them down and they're out there, you're held to a certain standard because you got to back it up.
Yeah.
So I started writing what I believed a long time ago. And I found that when I had situations in my family, friendships, and people were like, wait a minute, is this a disease? Is it not a disease? I could feel the tension grow in that exchange. I learned to see it pretty much at the outset of the conversation sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
And so when I felt that tension building, I'd say, you know what, I have a book about this. And I'd give them one of Stanton Peele's books or somebody, Jeffrey Shaler's Addiction is a Choice or one of those books. And I'd give them my book. And I'd say, listen, here's not my opinion. This is some other researcher's opinion and my opinion, but they're really not opinions. But I would say that just to loosen the conversation. I'd say, here, read these.
Yeah.
And I used to keep, and I still do, I keep a supply of these things in my truck. And everywhere I go, I get in conversations. And then now, whether they read it or not, kind of is the determining factor of whether they're really looking for a solution. Now, I'm not going to say that everybody reads. Some people are just going to get a book and not read it.
Mm-hmm.
I get it. But I got to tell you, they read portions.
Well, and that's the thing too. If somebody's genuinely concerned about you and they're worried that this is a problem for you, number one, what you do or don't do is none of their damn business. I just want to put that out there. But if this is like your spouse or if this is your parents and you want to reassure them, if they're genuinely concerned, they will read.
Yeah.
And you can hand them the family book or you can hand them the other book and you can say, this is a different take on what I'm doing, and the other thing is if people are allowed to live their lives the way they want to live it. So you get to say, I'm paying my bills. I'm an adult. I'm living on my own. I really do get to do these things. I want to assure you that I'm happy and I'm and my life is good and they'll be able to see that in the way you're living.
Now, what if the person, though, we'll get this question from people who are genuinely causing chaos.
Yes, there is that. There is that factor.
I've done this personally. She's done it. He's done it.
Yeah.
So, and then they say, I just want to get my wife off my back. Jesus Christ, she's all over me. I just drink a 6-pack a night, which I have a 50% rule, and somebody's telling me that in defense of their drinking. They're usually drinking about a 12-pack, about a 12-pack, and maybe a little scotch early in the morning or something. And so in that case, I tell them, you got to own it.
Yeah, don't lie. Don't minimize.
If you're going to drink the way a heavy drinker drinks,
or smoke pot heavily,
or do heroin, and it's problematic with everybody around you, you either can slink around and act the part of, hey, you're all a bunch of jerks, I'm really not having a problem, or you can say, you know what, I really like doing this,
and this is the way I'm going to live, and you either like it or you don't like it, and there's nothing I can do about it, and I'm willing.
So that's I think that what's important about this is that you kind of control the conversation, because if it's that if it's that you're going to hide it and dodge the question, then there's always going to be this suspicion And it's always going to be that what you're doing is probably so much worse in their minds, right?
Oh, yeah.
And if you control it by being out in the open, here's what I do. And here's everything else that's going on in my life. So tell me how it's a problem, right? You're kind of controlling the conversation at that point.
But again, you have to be willing to but again, you have to be willing to have those
bear the brunt of that. Right?
Yeah, I mean, you might not have relationships with these people after you have that conversation. You have to go in knowing, hey, in order for me to get high the way I like to get high, I might be sacrificing lifelong relationships. So you have to figure that beforehand. Am I willing to do that? Now, I'm going to tell you, if you lie about it, in the end, it's going to come out anyway, especially if you get high a lot. It's really tough to live that lifestyle and hide it for huge, long periods of time and get away with it. People do it, but it's extremely stressful.
Yeah.
It is, and it makes the drugs, whatever the drug is, seem more precious to you when you're hiding it.
Yep, it's your little baby.
Yeah. Excuse me.
We've gotten 2 comments on this. One is from Pablo, and he said CBD physical benefits without psychoactive effects. I don't know much about that, so I can't speak to that. And Matthew told us that the name of the book is Healing Back Pain, The Mind-Body Connection.
It is. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you, Matthew.
I also wanted to say, in this situation, that again, there's the league and there's the family, and so how out in the open can you be about what you want to do? It varies depending on what you want to tackle here. I want to say that with marijuana, there was research done because there's been this longstanding myth that it takes away a person's entire drive to do anything, right? It makes you lazy.
Yeah, you're the stoner.
And I was in the theater world here, and I have tons of friends who are very successful comedy writers and actors that smoke a ton of pot. I think that's almost why they have this job, because nobody cares if you smoke pot in that field. But there was research done on people who picked sugarcane, I think it was, in Jamaica, and they distinguished between pot smokers and those who didn't smoke pot, and there was literally no difference in productivity whatsoever. And there's all sorts of studies that show you grow a tolerance to marijuana over time, to where you can behave pretty normally on it. A lot of people do. And so I think that the worry with sports or something is that, that's just going to make you into a lazy person who can't play your sport. And it's like demonstrably not true. There's evidence to show that, that I guess the main problem here is that it causes conflict. It's just like, being in conflict with the cops about buying drugs. It's the same thing. It's like, what are you going to do?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the comments that this professional athlete brought up, he brought up that point when he had written us a lot longer piece. And he said, I almost think they're against this because of the stoner image.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm not smoking pot because I'm a stoner.
Right.
He's like,
I'm not smoking to get high.
He said, I do it because I don't want to be eating fistfuls of opiates like all my buddies are, because their bodies are falling apart.
Right.
And he said, if anything, that really affects your performance. And it does.
He's definitely right.
It's pretty tough to be strong and tough and fast when you're basically on heroin. Right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? When you're taking oral heroin. So it's he makes a good point. So the stoner thing, I'm glad you brought up the fact that
where some of that research is in a book called The Cult of Pharmacology by Richard Quigley.
Oh yes.
Really good book.
Not that I'm going to send somebody to a book on everything, but maybe if you want to start to build a case and say, hey, like, here's what I know about this. Like, if it is somebody really close to you, you care about, and you want to explain why, and you want to ease their fears, the best thing you can do is just get educated about what the real facts are about it.
All right, this is a good one. The opioid crisis is a hot topic as of late, and recently there was a huge settlement from some of the pharmaceutical companies over their supposed role in the crisis. Do you guys think going after these companies as the root cause is a productive course of action? Hell no. And are they at fault here? Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, what can we say about this? I mean, the opium has been around forever. And opium, by the way, contains morphine and codeine. You're getting both of those in one with a few other opiates that people get in separate pills nowadays. But when people just took opium, it had all these opiates.
Right.
It was pure opiate.
Yeah. You know, and that's been used for 6,000 years. And there is literally no mention of addiction until the 1800s. There's no mention anywhere in any ancient literature, sea scrolls, tablets, you name it, nothing about opioid addiction, addiction to opium. It was the world's most effective medicine forever. For at least 5,800 years, people were using it, and nobody called it addictive, right? And in fact, they called alcohol addictive before they called opium addictive. That was decades before opium was labeled as addictive.
Which
sorry, am I jumping way too ahead?
No. It's good. I just wanted to point out why the difference with alcohol and opium in a lot of the ancient cultures before modern plumbing. Everybody was afraid of water, so you were drinking from an incredibly young age massive amounts of booze, and the people that drank consistently would get addicted. They would get physically dependent on booze, but there weren't that many of them. Okay, but the point is, you have to drink a ton. They drank young, but it was culturally driven. But the amount of people that talked about being addicted by alcohol was still small. It's minor in literature, even at a time when they were drinking it continuously at a younger age in bigger amounts and more consistently than modern times. So obviously, our view on alcohol has changed, and our view on opium has changed. And Steve makes a great point. The opium that they had was pure opium. That's all it was. It was the best heroin you could ever have gotten. You know,
if we talk about opiates, you know, we say morphine, codeine. Both of those were in the thing, along with several others. I can't even remember the names of all the different opiates that are in opium, right? And then heroin is refined out of that, but basically heroin turns into morphine in your body, and it's faster acting. It's 3 times stronger than morphine. But the thing is, this would be like to say that heroin is somehow more addictive, or that OxyContin is, because it's a more concentrated form, would be like saying that vodka or whiskey is more addictive than beer. And it, like that would be the only difference there. It's the same substance, and we know plenty of people who develop a physical dependence on alcohol with beer only, or wine only, right? So the whole going after drug companies is based on the idea that opiates are an addictive drug, or that opioids are an addictive drug, and the idea that they downplayed the addictive power, right? That's what you're hearing now. Yeah. That they downplayed it, and they said that, oh, only 1% of patients or whatever get an addiction. Well, it's true.
It is true.
Yeah.
That is true. They even came out with OxyContin in a form. Well, first of all, OxyContin was supposed to be slower release, and then they came out with a form that gelled up if you tried to melt it. I mean, cook it up. I don't even know what word I'm looking for. But no, they're not the root of it. The people who are spreading the idea that drugs are addictive, the people who have made prohibition, right? And again, read Richard de Grand Prix's book. He goes through, we prohibited opioids to people. They used to buy them on the open market, and we had a much lower percentage of addiction back then in the 1800s, in the early 1900s than we do now. But the doctors came in and they wanted to monopolize opioids, and the government made them legal for a whole bunch of racist and political reasons having to do with China and England and Chinese people that they did not like here, and all sorts of crazy. The whole story of how we got here is crazy. I'm sorry if I'm babbling about it, but
it's good.
But the point is, we prohibited those, and then we came up with barbiturates, and we came up with benzos, and we came up with all these different kind of synthetic drugs to try to replace a drug that in its pure form was helpful to people in 15 million ways, right? And we made all these other drugs. They turned out to be more deadly. Now we have the gabapentin. That's the next one that's going to be on the list that's killing people, as well as tramadol, right? Because we are trying to get further and further away and make a non-addictive drug or whatever, and controlling it. And really, it's all of this controlling in the first place that's making things worse. And we really should be going after the addiction treatment industry and the people who support drug prohibition. That's what's causing the problems. That's why people are dying of fentanyl out in the street.
That's exactly.
And I want to make another quick point, and that is the medicalization of addiction, of behavior. So now you get people, and they go through the cycle. They're told they have a disease. They're told they're powerless. They're told you've got to take this medicine. They're put on a bunch of different medications. They're sent home, go to meetings, go to counseling, and so now they're on all these medications. They've got planted in their brain that I have a disease, I'm powerless, I'm going to continuously crave heroin, I'm going to continuously crave, but they're on all these medications that's supposed to be making them feel better and not crave and do all this stuff. And it's not a coincidence that the further we go into this medicalization of addiction, the worse the problem is.
Exactly.
And so that when you combine all these factors, you kind of have a perfect storm of what we're seeing today.
It's all based in the belief of loss of control, a disease that does not exist. Again, that addiction happens to you.
Right.
That
drugs are inherently addicting.
That you're susceptible to addiction, and that you're fragile in some way, and that you need to be supported and propped up with a treatment industry. So without all this mythology, there's no reason to have treatment, right? There's no recovery. If there's no disease, what are you recovering from? So, right. I mean, we go over these terms in this way in every live broadcast because we want the newer people that are here to hear this. Then maybe they've heard it for the first time. I just want to say unequivocally that there is no disease of addiction. Most people don't know that. They haven't heard that. Right. It's kind of shocking to me. I've been doing this for 30 years, going against the disease concept. So for me, it's like old hat. But for the majority of parents out there, they're saying my son has a disease, and I mean, they're bewildered, and it sounds pseudo right, kind of right. And that's the problem with half truths. If you mix a real bad lie with just enough truth, you get stuff that kills people.
Yeah.
So the treatment industry and the disease concept are married, and that's
who we should blame, not drug companies.
That's exactly right.
The only degree to which I blame the drug companies right now is to the degree that they've tried to monopolize drugs and played a part in all of that, right? And I blame them for pushing buprenorphine and methadone.
They're participating.
What's that?
They're participating in the whole addiction disease.
Yeah, to that degree, because they're part of the charade. Yes, that's a great way of putting it. So no, we shouldn't go after them. They're not the problem. These drugs are not addictive. They can produce physical dependence, but most people never even understand that they have that physical dependence. I know we've been over this again and again and again, but you come out of the hospital after surgery, hopped up on morphine for a couple weeks, you go through withdrawal and you don't know it. You just know that you feel sick and then you're done. But it's when you teach people that that sickness is unbearable and will drive them to use drugs, that's when they really become addicted. And this was demonstrated by Alfred Linsmith back in the 1940s. Look him up, look at his book. Don't blame the drug companies. It's not the drugs. It's the way that we perceive the drug.
I just we got a comment from Matthew. He said, they're handing out gabapentin scripts like candy in treatment these days. I can trip and fall into 6 people in recovery taking gabapentin every day. And I got to tell you, I had a hip replacement a couple of years ago. And one of the things that I was put on for nerve pain was gabapentin. And I took it for I was put on opiates as well. And I took it for about 3 days. And it did not agree with me. It was really, really an unpleasant, it's hard to explain. I thought some weird things. It was an unpleasant experience. And so I don't personally recommend it. I
was on it a year and a half ago as well for about a week or 2, maybe close to 2 weeks, and I hated it and I wanted to get right off of it. It made me feel weird. And actually, they're trying to reclassify it in England now because they're getting deaths from it and all kinds of problems. That's going on right now. And this is just yet another attempt because we refuse to just like play it cool with Percocets and let people have
let people
we've got to we invent these crazy things that work in unknown ways.
Well,
they don't know how they work.
Yeah, do you remember? I mean, think about the number of lawsuits that happened with the SSRIs like Paxil.
Oh yeah,
and I mean, look at that
all over again with pain medications now.
But there's so much money to be made. What happens is you watch, and we watched it actually with methadone because methadone, came out of the 60s and 70s, and then as a system it failed. And I remember in the end of the 70s being a kid, because I was involved in the treatment industry, my whole family was involved. Right. I remember that the methadone thing was then kind of skedaddled over into the ghettos. There were a couple of methadone clinics here and there, but only in the ghettos, to deal with those issues. But it was almost extinguished. And then as heroin came back on the scene, they said, well, we really need to do this again. Methadone started to rise, and then Suboxone hit. Because basically it's the same theory, same model, same financial model, same government interdiction model, just with a new name. Mm-hmm. And then methadone sort of is kind of waddling there and has risen again. But it's all centered around the idea that there's a medication, that you're taking medicine for a preference for what you consider your other medicine.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what we should
read. So weird.
Yeah.
You're saying addiction is not a disease. Well, what is it? It's a preference, right? I prefer to take these drugs. I feel better taking them than not taking them. Now that can break down in a whole bunch of different ways, right? But and it has to do with life circumstances. A lot of times people point to, oh, well, so-and-so's life is so horrible and that's why they use drugs. And that could be true on some level. A horrible life doesn't force you to use drugs. But being in that situation, thinking however you might think, you could think, well, there's nothing better for me in this world than smoking crack all day, every day. And if that's how you see it, then you prefer to smoke crack, right? And we call this addiction, but it's a really personal the love of something or preference for something. And it's not about the drugs. It's about what the person sees in the drugs. And we all go through changes in our life where we can start to see those drugs differently, start to see our other options differently. And that's what the freedom model is all about, is about figuring that out, getting back in touch with that. Instead of fighting this magical entity of an addictive drug or the disease of addiction, right? Throw that out. Throw out the idea that somebody's going to treat you, that a pill is going to cure you, any of this. And just say, okay, I'm doing this because I like it. would I like changing better? And I know this is a simplified version, but you know, we take 450 pages to try and like guide people into it and sort of sorting that out. And I think we need to say that, right? Because we're shooting down everything, but then what are we really offering as an explanation? It's important to know that. And so if anybody's watching and hasn't gotten the book, you should get the book and read it. It's going to tell you far more than we could ever in this format.
And then if you read the book and there's anything you disagree with, bring it on to the live broadcast.
Yeah.
Ask us questions.
We want to have debate. We want to parse out this stuff and explain it to anybody that wants to know. I want to say something quick, and then I know Michelle has some things to say. If you have questions, if you want to talk to me, you can call us at the 188 number. You can talk to Michelle. You can talk directly to Steve. We're probably the only authors of a major book that literally will get on the phone with you and talk for hours. That's what we want to do. You have us, you have access to us, and we'd be happy to answer your questions.
Yes, and we have 2 more questions, but we're not going to have time to get to them today. We'll get to them in our next broadcast, or maybe, you know what we'll do? We'll tackle them in the podcast.
Oh yeah,
in our next podcast,
which is next week.
Yes. And they are just really quick. What about going to support groups that are non-12 step? So there's one that's about that. And then the other one is about when you learn that you have all this power and you do the freedom model, what is, you know, the struggle is then you spend all your time and energy doing this whole 12-step thing. And what's that like after, you know?
What's life like after the 12 steps, after you debunk all the 12-step nonsense?
And then you have to move on and you're like, what the hell should I be doing?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But we've all done that. So we can help you with that.
We'll address that. I want to just announce that we are going to be local here in Amsterdam, May 18th at our Spring Fling. We're going to have a booth set up. And so if you're local and you want to come down and talk with us, we're going to be there. Probably most of the day we're going to switch on and off. We'll have some of our other staff that's going to be there as well. So we're excited about that. Then at the end of the month, we have the Freihoffers Run for Women in Troy, New York. And we are going to have a booth set up there. You have to look it up. There's a health and wellness expo surrounding that. We're going to be there 2 days. Then at the end of June, providing we get the okay. No, the end of June we are doing that. The one that we're doing in September, we have to get the okay with the one in September because that's an addiction professionals conference.
Yeah.
And so I got a little thing that says, tell me about your organization before I approve it, which I think will be interesting. But in June 24th, we're going to be at Rutgers. Steve, I don't even think knows all of this yet, so he's just learning it for the first time. Oh no, you do know about the Rutgers thing. And we're going to be there all day, and that's like an educational conference for people to get continuing ed credits for
addiction
clinicians. Yeah. So we have a lot of stuff coming up. We'll have all that stuff listed at thefreedommodel.org so that you can know, and we'll also keep it going on Facebook and letting you know where we're going to be. So if you want to come and meet us, we'd love to talk with you.
Yeah, one-on-one.
Yep. I think we have about 1 more minute or so. Do you have any closing remarks, Steve?
Yeah, wait, what was that question? What was the first one of the questions? Was it about other support group meetings? Support group meetings, and we know this from experience. We had our own support group.
We did.
It was like you don't need to go to meetings for the rest of your life. It was so much of it was the antithesis of AA in so many ways. And it still ended up creating dependence on the support group. A support group supports the idea that you're weak.
That you're fragile.
Fragile. Yeah, why would you need support? Right? Support. You put support under a bridge because it's weak and it's about to fall. Right? So I just want to answer that question really quickly. It supports the idea that you are weak. And this is not about strength or weakness. It's about figuring out what you really want.
What would make you happier?
Yeah. Well, thank you everybody for watching. I guess that's our show for this evening because we've come upon the hour. Thanks, Steve and Mark. And we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.